living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
With Pam and John. This is SPEDTalk.
Welcome to SPEDTalk with Pam
and John,
also known as The Calm.
Before the Storm.
Our purpose is to elevate the conversation and amplify special education resources.
And our why is all about the kids. You know, Pam, there are so many organizations and people around Texas who are just making it happen for kids with disabilities.
So let's make this a platform to celebrate their efforts, because special education is about making the impossible possible.
Okay, well, we hit the record button. That means we're live and we're on air, and we're jumping back into this SPEDTalk thing. We hadn't done this in a while. Pam and I have done a few of these virtual kind of Zoom sessions where we've been able to celebrate some of the work going on around the state. And right now, one thing we do know is there is a lot of work going around, you know, on in the state, and there's some really innovative things going on just out of necessity with COVID-19 and just all of the uncertainties, and our schools are just kind of just reinventing our system as we go, and TEA is trying to support every way they can. Of course, ESCs are doing the same. But Pam, it sure is good to be back on. What you got going?
Hey, John, it really is. I've been working, believe it or not, I've been working on the CSIP. It's my job to do our reporting. So that's been my last few days, weeks, it seems like, trying to get all that data ready to submit to the agency.
That's no small task. I'll tell you what, I know Chris has been in on that and hitting me up a little bit on that. Luckily, Chris, our director here at ESC 12, manages that. But man, and it's taken on a little bit of a new face, I think, that new CSIP.
Right. Yeah,
so that's.
Yeah, I'm glad this one is ending and we're starting something different. So I'm excited. But hey, but I'm more excited about today, though. Let's just CSIP aside.
Well, who's in the room, Pam?
So who's in the room?
Who's in the virtual room?
I'm Cara Wyly. I'm the project manager for the Inclusion in Texas Network.
Good to have you on with us.
Thanks.
And I'm Laura Wilk, and I am the program specialist at TEA who's over the Inclusion Initiative. TEA has a lot of different work streams that have to do with inclusion and supporting our state in moving towards inclusive practices. And one of the highlights and the most important parts of my position are working with Cara Wyly at Region 20 on our Inclusion in Texas network. So honored to be here and talking with you all today.
Good stuff.
I'm going to tell you something, because as John knows and teased me about me being a veteran and somewhat old, is that when I started at the service center many years ago in Wichita Falls, Region 9, I came on to work in the area of inclusion. And that was the beginning of, Inclusion in Texas, which has morphed over, being AGC and whatever else. But I was so excited to see that we're getting back to the focus of inclusion. So it's great to see that.
Yeah, I'll second that. I'll tell you what, AGC to PGC to, Inclusion in Texas. And this is, to me, one of the most important initiatives that we have, because it really touches all aspects of not just students with disabilities, but students without disabilities, right? Because inclusion is not just about how can we create these general ed experiences for students with disabilities, but how can we normalize relationships between disabled, non-disabled, that learning environment that really supports all aspects of kids. And so I think that Cara, the work at Region 20, I've been a fan of that for many years, back when I was a director, and the PGC and the AGC, all the stuff you guys pumped out was just some of the best, I think, documents and support documents that we've had in the state of Texas. So I'm with you, Pam. I'm excited to have you guys on.
I wish I could take credit for all of that. I inherited a lot of good stuff. So I was able to just kind of build on what Aaron did before Aaron, and then Lisa was in there and Dawn was in there. So yeah, we've got some good stuff.
Well, getting started, like I know going in, Pam and I are real happy to be kind of in this spot right now to really be able to showcase some of our networks across the state. And I think if you are a practitioner, a lot of times these are a little bit removed from what a teacher does in the classroom on a daily basis, or the myriad tasks that a director is trying to manage on a regular basis. And so I used to say that some of our networks and like PGC were some of the best hidden little secrets we had in Texas, because just so many people didn't even know this great stuff was out there. So if you guys want to just talk a little bit about, you know, some of the things that you've got going on with the new network and how that stuff kind of ties in and relates to the people that are familiar with PGC and some of those older reliable documents that are out there.
Well, I think Inclusion in Texas Network has continued the work of the progress in the general curriculum, and we're just enhancing everything they did. So we've got a lot of good stuff going on. And I just wanted to say that you mentioned that inclusion is so important, and I have spent my entire educational career working with those kids that don't fit in, whether they're general ed that don't fit in or kids with disabilities. And I completely agree with you that this isn't just about our kids with disabilities. It's making everybody comfortable in a classroom and making them feel like they're just part of a family, you know, in a family environment in there.
Yeah,
So
I would
hopefully
piggyback on that, Cara. That's exactly right. You know, our kids are gen ed kids first.
Right.
And I think that that's easily forgotten. I also want to just jump in real quick, and then I'm going to be quiet while Cara talks. But exciting thing to me, John, when you were talking about being kind of a hidden gem, is that what our network is putting out in terms of trainings and resources are resources that teachers in the classroom are going to be able to use immediately. So it's not something like, you know, it is great information. We have information that's supportive of administration and people like that as well, but we have a heart for our teachers, giving them the best evidence-based practices that we can to help them create inclusive settings for kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, I know so often we, depending on where we sit and where our areas of influence are, sometimes we feel the longer you stay in education, the more removed from the classroom you start to feel. And I feel like TEA and our ESCs have really been intentional to really get back to how do we support that teacher in that classroom, right? How do we provide supports? Of course, we're going to support our campus administrators and our directors and our superintendents. That's a given. But so often there is that information flow, kind of the teachers are the last ones to get it, not the first ones, when sometimes this stuff should be going straight to them. And so I love that, Laura, that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and that's next year is one of our wishes, I guess. One of our goals is to do some more marketing and get this stuff out to teachers because they don't know about it. And I've been to conferences in the past with PGC material and people just walk right by the booth because they've never heard of us, you know, and then when they stop and actually look at stuff, they're like, where has this been? Why don't I know about this? So yeah, we need to get it out there. I think I know our goal with the Inclusion in Texas network is to try and close that gap between our kids that have disabilities and those kids that do not have disabilities, because we know that they're just not progressing in the general curriculum like they should be. And so that's really one of our main goals, is to build a capacity within districts to support educators so that our kids get that instruction they really need that meets those specific needs, so they don't just have access to the curriculum, but they actually grow and progress, and we close those gaps for those kids. So we've got lots of good resources for that and some really good stuff coming. I think the most visible thing we have right now is our website. So it's inclusiontx.org. And right now we pulled some stuff from the old PGC network over into our new website. We have reading and math resources. We have resources from some of the state guidance documents that we've had in the past, like co-teaching, specially designed instruction. What else?
Working with paras.
Yeah, working with paras, co-teaching. Yeah. I said that, I think, already.
Yeah.
Grading and progress monitoring. So those are all state guidance documents they're full of information, and we're starting to revise those and get the most current research in those. So, you know, be on the lookout for those coming out, especially next year.
That's great. So we can expect for those to still be there for those out there that are used to having access to those. They'll just be updated and improved.
Yeah. In fact, the old PGC network is still live because we don't want any of that to go away. So as we transition to the new documents, we just move things from the PGC website over to the new Inclusion in Texas.
Sure.
website.
So how long will that PGC, is that going to be something that stays live kind of just during that transition period, and as things move over and as people begin to understand that, hey, this is here, but it's also linked here, then eventually they'll know, look, all of this is over on that Inclusion in Texas website?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. It'll just be there until we can get all the materials transferred over to the new website.
One thing I heard, with the COVID shutdown, the new COVID life, is that just listening to special ed directors was that students that were in general, the special ed students that were in general education classroom were faring much better than those that were in resource classrooms, because they were able to receive instructions that they were used to getting, and that the special ed teachers really kind of struggled with how do we make, do the text or the text, whatever you say, however you say it, and, and provide that instruction at home. And that when we think about COVID, or when we think about, the hybrid model of either being in class or online, that how important it is that when we, to look at inclusion. Because even parents said, my child might have struggled in the regular classroom, but since he had time, or she had time to complete it, or needed clarification, she was able to text the teacher or whatever, to get that clarification. I think also teachers were very mindful about ensuring that students could access their lessons and doing those accommodations for every, for the students that need accommodations, or those students who need, modified curriculum, that it wasn't, in a weird way, being away from the day-to-day grind of teaching, traditional teaching, made teachers aware of different things they could use to reach all their learners.
Yeah.
And that's been so interesting to hear people talk about, wow, I was able to do this for my students, which I might not have thought about doing if I was still doing the face-to-face work. Has anybody else heard things like this, or it's just I'm living in a world?
No, I agree with you, Pam. I think what it is a lot of teachers have had a moment to breathe, right? Educators have had this, not just this global, experience where we're all kind of experiencing the same thing at the same time together across the globe, which is in some ways very humbling, but I think it also has allowed us time to take stock and to really have a little bit more time to process and to reflect on practice, and to explore and to consider things we may have forgotten or missed, or that we wanted to circle back to, but we just in our daily grind didn't have the time to do so. So Pam, I think you're right. I've seen evidence of that in a lot of educators who have reached out and that say, look, I feel like in some ways I'm more connected to the parents right now. I'm more connected to the students right now, because we have kind of these regular Zoom meetings, these regular, and it's very intentional, the time that we spend together. And so it's an interesting insight. Laura?
Yeah, I think that one area that we're going to really grow in is, and that we need to do a lot more thinking and learning about, is progress monitoring and providing interventions in a virtual setting. How that works. Actually, we just finished a community of practice through TEA and the National Centers on Intensive Intervention with a small group of Texas teachers practicing those virtual interventions and things. And for their final projects, it was really interesting to see their problem of practice and then what they found to kind of meet a very specific need that they were having. But I think that that's ongoing learning that we're going to be very well poised to kind of start taking those problem of practices as our teachers and finding innovative solutions to them. It's kind of exciting.
I don't know that this online learning is going to go away completely, even after we've beat COVID. It's too appropriate for some kids.
Yeah.
They just do better that way.
Yeah, it really has been one of those things, I think, that has been in the background of these conversations we've had for years, which is how do we ramp up and really meet the educational needs of our 21st century learners who are, you know, digital natives, and they could teach us a lesson or two about this stuff. And so I feel like this is not just our wake up call, but what an opportunity for us to say, hey, you know, out of necessity, but even beyond that, you know, this is our opportunity to catch up a little bit with the technological advances, but also with exploiting some of these resources to help the learning process. And so, yeah, I think that, Cara, you're spot on with that.
And I think it's for teachers also. I mean, we've been trying to do that for years. Everybody keeps saying we need to do more online learning for educators. And this forced we had to now. And so it's been interesting to see what my colleagues have been able to do for online learning that we would probably not have thought about 6-8 months ago. You know?
Sure.
And so one of the things the Inclusion in Texas Network is doing, we've got 2 trainings coming out statewide. We have a math training and reading training coming out for the other ESCs to train. They're aligned with the math and reading academies, but they focus on those students that are that need inclusive practices. Those will be coming out virtually as well next year. So our teachers will be able to attend those in their pajamas online as well.
Right. Business on the top and pajamas on the bottom.
That's right.
That's the new norm. So you said those will be facilitated through the ESCs?
Yes. So
Awesome.
this year we're rolling out the trainers for the service centers. And then in the fall, they'll be able to do those trainings virtually. And then in the spring, they can turn them around face-to-face, hopefully be able to turn them around face-to-face for their clients as well in their regions.
Okay. So, you know, as we think about inclusion and we think about the virtual world, you know, what do you think, I'm just going to throw this out, you know, what do you think about what would inclusion look like in a virtual setting?
It's a great
Somebody's
question.
going to ask that question besides me.
Yeah.
You know, I almost think, I don't know, I may be really off here.
No wrong answers.
But it would be a little easier to make sure everybody is included because you see everybody's face. You know, it's like you're almost more intimate with people instead of looking at it as sea of faces in a classroom. And that brings those kids more into your headspace, so they don't fall through the cracks as easily. I mean, I may be way off on that, but that's just my thinking. And that there's also, if they're learning at home and we don't have all the materials they may need, we're having to get creative. And so that helps the learning at home as well. So if the kids are going, oh, okay, I don't have a bookmark to help me with this, but I can grab this piece of paper or this ruler or whatever that's at my house to help me keep reading and not skip lines, then I can do that at home. I don't have to be at school to learn this. I can be anywhere and use these accommodations or, you know, modification, whatever they need.
Yeah, I would add to that, Cara. I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think that technology is a great leveler of the playing field. And so now we have a situation where in a lot of cases, it's not one student has a piece of technology and the rest of the class is learning in a different format. The whole class has the same technology. And you couldn't tell the difference between one student or another if you were just to look at that, either if it's a face-to-face setting and all the students have a Chromebook, or if they're all learning from home, you know, then that student who may need accommodations has them embedded. So for example, if I need speech to text or text to speech, it's simply an app or an extension that I have already on my laptop, which all my other peers have that as well. Oh yeah, I could use it too.
That's right.
So now my accommodation, which is in my plan and everything, has now become a universal support. So the benefit goes both ways. And that's what inclusion is all about, that there's a benefit to my general education peers and there's a benefit to me. And it's a leveler playing field. So, I mean, I think it's extremely exciting. The other thing that the Inclusion in Texas website has, and that we're continuing to build, is our AT resources as well. So, I mean, I think that all of that just goes hand in hand. And I think more and more assistive technology is going to play a much more prominent role
Mhm.
in how we plan lessons and how we provide instruction.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, Laura, the idea that, you know, the assistive technology piece has been a piece that has been hit or miss in a lot of our schools for many years, that I've experienced a lot sometimes in your small rural schools. If they lack either the you know, the resources, the technology, the Wi-Fi, things like that, but more and more we're seeing schools that have more and more access to these things. I know there's still a divide between those that can stream it in fast stream, you know, and the others that just really struggle to. But at the end of the day, I feel like with this network, Inclusion in Texas, being able to take a leading role in that and creating kind of that avenue to these assistive technology, whether they be programs, whether they be ideas, whether they be techniques, approaches, things like that, will just serve to improve that across really the state. And that's an area we've struggled. And so I think that's huge. The other thing is that, you know, I think about inclusion, and I think about how the goal is not necessarily that we, you know, give everybody what they need all the time. It's that we create like this autonomy in kids, right? That it's not a teacher that has to mandate a kid has this or doesn't have that. It's that students learn to be kind of self-directed and say, hey, here's this tool. I know how to use it. I'm going to use this feature because it helps me. And you're going to use that feature because it helps you. And then they come back into the that's where I feel like this could really move us forward. Even when kids come back to the building and are there and they say, hey, miss, remember, I need text to speech. You know, the whole last year I've been doing that. I do great on that. But, and that's, I think what we want are these kids that can show us as adults, hey, here's what I need. And this is why I need it. So I feel like that's just another kind of little silver lining here.
Yeah, perfectly said. That's kind of what I was trying to express. I just didn't do it as well as you did.
You did fine.
Oh, you did great.
Yeah. No, it's just
Go ahead, Pam.
no, I think it's just an interesting time. I just think about, you know, all the barriers, you know, with inclusion, you know, all the reason why we can't do it. And now, because we're thrown in a situation where we really have to do it, because kids are, you know, are needing those accommodations, and we have to meet their needs, whether, you know, if they're learning virtually, and how teachers have stepped up. And probably some who really don't realize the things that they said they can't do, they are not doing, you know? So I think I just find it to be interesting and somewhat, before, you know, heartwarming before I do my big exit out of here, that I get to see it.
Yeah.
Well, and that brings to mind universal design, right?
Right, exactly.
Some modules that the network is putting out, they're just about ready, are modules that are interactive and easy for teachers to learn about UDL practices to use in their whatever their learning environment is at that time. And I think that really does speak to that tier one, having a robust tier one support is all about what you just said, Pam, is about removing barriers.
Yes.
And so that's another great resource that the network's going to be, that's going to have available. But I think more and more learning about UDL and actually implementing that kind of lesson planning, you know, planning for the kids in the margins helps all kids. Also helps teachers, right? It's an approach to making an inclusive environment. So another exciting thing from inclusion.
Yeah, that's
Right.
great. You know, you think about it, at the end of the day, I always like to say, I used to tell my teachers, like, if at the end of the day, you are more exhausted than the kids, then it's backwards, right? We have to create the opportunities for kids to really own the learning, own the activities, own the process. And you're there to facilitate that learning and make sure that, you know, they're moving in the right direction and that you're spot checking for understanding and those kinds of things. But not that, you know, we used to be, as teachers, as educators, we had to be the most entertaining, interesting people in the room. Well, now we need to be less entertaining and more, or less interesting and more interested in what's going on around us, so that we can tune into those things and help those kids become the interesting people that they are and that they need to become, so that they can move successfully through their educational opportunities. So, yeah.
I think one thing I'm really excited about for next year is we're collaborating with a couple of other networks, with Texas Can, and also, I can't think of the network, but it's the multiple exceptionalities.
Multiple exceptionalities.
Thank you. Yes. So we're really taking in the entire spectrum of kids. It's not just, I guess I feel like some people have this belief that inclusion is for those kids that they're okay. They don't have a lot of learning problems. You know, it's just they're behind a little bit with some disabilities, but really inclusion, anybody and everybody can be included in the classroom. So I'm really excited, really, especially to be working with Texas Can next year, and then also the multiple exceptionalities, because we're going to get everybody in there.
That's positive.
And early childhood, we're working with them too.
Yeah, right.
That's where it all starts.
Yeah.
The early childhood. I feel like, you create experiences for children to enter a system, whether you have one arm or two arms, one eye or two eyes. You can read well, you can do math, but you put them in there, they learn together, and then in third grade and fifth grade, and when they go out into the world and hire people, they don't see a kid with a disability or without an arm. They see their friend, hey, there's Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy, come here. I know you're good at these things. Let me hire you to do this or that. And so we normalize that stuff early on. And I feel like that's where I am excited to see more and more attention paid to that early childhood, that entry into our system. And how do we normalize it from that point forward?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when you talked about information for parents, one thing I was thinking about is that when I served as the state lead for the parent network for TEA, and one thing we were going through was that we had gone through a phase where parents were apologizing for their kids. I'm sorry that my child has a disability, and basically infringing on you, and then went from that mode to the anger and the fight. I'm going to fight you, the school district, or with whomever, for everything for my child, because you're not valuing my child. And now I think we're at a place where parents are wanting you to see their child as they're seeing their child, as a person, as a person with abilities, as opposed to disabilities. And that they are, a lot of parents are including their kids in family activities. They're not leaving these kids at home. They're not placing them somewhere. And so when you're talking about working with Texas Can and looking at kids with multiple disabilities, why aren't they in the classrooms? Why aren't they getting the opportunity to learn and to hear? Because what we're seeing is on the other end of the spectrum, once they get ready to exit high school, those students that were included were much better than those students who were in self-contained classrooms, majority of their education career. And and families who are fighting for those inclusion, want their child included. People, it's one of those. I mean, I can understand both sides, but I think from a parent perspective, is that since there's no special ed McDonald's, there's no special ed mall, and my child has to operate within this community, then I want my child to have every experience he or she can have, and in inclusive settings. So yes, it's in the class, maybe in the classroom setting, and no, they won't be able to learn algebra to the extent that their non-disabled peers are learning it, but they can learn something. They can gain information and knowledge and become part of that learning community. And I think that's the beauty of inclusion. I think that's, that we should be willing to work toward, educating kids to the best of their abilities, and not what we can deem as our ability, as a teacher, that, I teach science. Well, no, actually you teach kids.
Amen.
Science is just the content,
Yeah, and that's a long-term goal of our network. Overall, what we would like is to start seeing, creating frameworks that LEAs can use to transition from that traditional siloed educational model into an inclusive model. So definitely that's on our radar and something that we'll be working towards long-term.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. I've said a few times, and sometimes not real popular when I say it, but, we wouldn't need to include kids if our systems weren't exclusionary, right? So that's not popular to hear. And I think sometimes people say, what do you mean? I don't, but I say, like, when I think about my own children at home and what I want for them, I want them to be challenged and accepted. I want them to feel like they belong in whatever setting they're in. Even if they struggle in that setting, I want them to believe that, hey, I have a place here. And isn't that what we all want for our own children? So when we put ourselves into that seat of whoever you are, mom, dad, cousin, uncle, whoever's raising this kid, that kid, the other kid, at the end of the day, we all want the same things for our kids. It's just, it's not an us or them. It's just, yeah, all. So how do we kind of navigate some of the barriers, some of the constraints, some of the systemic things that are in place that kind of put into the minds of adults sometimes where kids belong or where they don't belong, and then create that educational experience for kids where it doesn't matter where they step foot, it doesn't matter where they sit down, that they have a seat at the table, they have a reason to be there, they have purpose, they can learn, and they can add value to that setting. To me, that's inclusion versus mainstreaming. You know, that's, I think, yeah, we came out of that procedural compliance phase with No Child Left Behind and a lot of things we've been doing. It's just, but now we're in a different phase, you know, and now we're into that effectiveness phase. Right now, it's like, are our practices effective? Which the emphasis now is, let's look at the child and are they learning? Not so much at the teacher and how are they acting on stage. And so I think all that ties into the work you're doing here with the Inclusion Network. Pam, what are you thinking?
Oh, I was just going to ask, is anything else you ladies want to share with us? Because John and I can just talk.
We just go.
We just go, especially him. So
guilty.
You know, John, when you were talking about what you just said, a lot of times when I do workshops for teachers on inclusion, one of the things I have them talk about is just what does it mean to be included? And I said, don't think about school at all. Just think about your neighborhood, your family, your friends. Yeah. What does it mean to include people in your group, you know, and what does it feel like to not be included in that? And how do your friends or family include you? What actions do you take to make sure everybody's engaged? And like you said, they have value as part of that community. Yeah. And then we try and transfer that to
the school setting. Yeah. You know, because it really goes back to not so much where you sit, but it's how you feel. Right. Like how I feel as a child walking into a system that doesn't want me to be there, or how I feel walking into a classroom with Coach King, who saw value in me when I was a kid and said, John, there's more to you, man. You don't have to drop out in 10th grade. You can get your doctorate degree at Baylor. You know what I mean? And I'm like, what? You know? And so that's what I think it is like so often it's kind of like what we see in kids is what they see in themselves. So it's how can we just see value instead of deficit? You know, and that's inclusion. That is inclusion. Hey, you have something that's special about you. I'm going to figure it out. And you're going to help me figure it out. And you're going to know what it is when we leave this class. You know, that's to me what we're striving for.
And I think that's systemic change, right? It's a systemic and cultural change that has to take place. And that may take a little bit of time for people to wrap their minds around it. But the power in what the Inclusion Network is doing, as well as the statewide leadership networks, the other ones through TEA that we have, we're giving the resources and the tools and the knowledge to teachers to enable them to make those changes, right? If you want to make a change, but you don't know how, then that's a barrier. Easier to stay where I'm comfortable because I know how to do comfortable. I don't know how to do this new thing, even though I might want to, right? And so kind of putting the tools in place and the supports in place to make that happen, I think that's very, very powerful right now. And I think that we're building a foundation where we can actually make systemic change something that occurs.
Yeah, well said.
And I think we're also building in longevity with that, Laura. You know, so many times we have this is what we're going to do this year, and the next year we're going to change it. But with the way the networks are working, we're building from one year to the next. And so it's taking longer, which is good to get things in place. So we actually have a foundation before we just jump off the cliff and start with something, you know. So I think the longevity of this systemic change is what's going to make it successful.
Like you said, longevity, I think sustainability. This will continue after, whether I'm in this role or the next person, that we're creating that foundation that will be, you know, kind of like compliance is now the foundation we have to have in place so that our new ceiling is outcomes. Used to be most of what we did in special ed was around compliance because that's how we were monitored. And so now the mindsets are starting to understand, oh, I get it. I mean, the compliance, those are just the rules and the things we have to do. That's important. We have to have that stuff. We have to have a foundation in place so we can shoot right for that new ceiling, which are the outcomes, the achievement, the growth. It doesn't matter how compliant we are if kids aren't learning. Right. And so, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. When you think about compliance, I mean, that's really the minimal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
It's really going to be the results and you know, and our students achieving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the question we have not been able to answer. You know, well, or we can look at our data and say, well, not looking good here.
Not so much, but yeah.
So, but I think it is focusing on the results and then really more focusing on the students and making sure they are in those environments, those open environments that are welcoming, are not seeing them as, you know, well, he has to be in here, or you know, the parents pushing for him. I'm not sure why the parents think, you know, are forcing the school to do this or that. You know, it's really about, as I used to tell people, you know, if you look at your contract, when you sign a contract with the school district, it doesn't say you only get to teach the best and the brightest.
Yeah.
You know, there's no contract that says that. You are assigned to a campus and you teach whoever comes through the door. Thus, public education.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, that we're not guaranteed the best and the brightest. That we are to teach, you know, every student, and for some it is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely challenging, but it doesn't mean we don't step up to the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just means that, okay, we might have to try harder. We might have to find some, you know, do something new, or ask somebody, you know, what can I do with this child, as opposed to saying he or she doesn't belong in my classroom. I think that was my biggest pet peeve, when someone told me, well, they don't belong. And I'm like, whoa,
you know,
how can someone not belong?
Yeah, I think, Pam, you know, I always like to say, like, a system always gives you exactly what it's designed to give you. And not that, you know, I feel like everywhere you go, like when you get up close to someone and get to know them, you end up liking them or disliking them, but you know, they're in it usually in education because they want to teach kids. They want to make a difference. It's all of this noise and these constraints and these different forces pushing in on them that inhibit them. Kind of, Laura, like you said, like a lot of people want to do, they just don't know how, and they feel so pressured and they don't quite know how to get there. And so for me, it's like, how do we, make everyone feel like, look, it's perfectly okay to be exactly where you are. You're right where you should be in your development. But now, like, knowing it, because you don't want to put people on edge of feeling bad or nothing, but then now how do we help you, or how do you help yourself move forward, right? Because I mean, education is about learning, not teaching, right? That's the whole process. And that's what I love about what's going on in Texas right now with our networks, with the redesign, with SPED, with just a lot. I mean, not that everything's perfect. You can find anything wrong with anything you want to look at. But at the end of the day, Texas really is kind of shaking and moving right now, as far as like, what are we doing for kids? And how are we focusing on how we are preparing kids or not preparing them for their future? So to me, that's exciting.
It is, and that brings to mind one thing that, Cara, I had forgotten to add. You know, we're trying to move away also from that sit and get professional development, where come in and we'll just over a day, you take our little materials back and then hope you use them, right? I mean, we don't do that to kids, so why would we do that to our teachers? So, you know, we are looking at coaching systems and providing some coaching cycles for teachers who would be interested in that after our trainings. And I think that that's very valuable in helping teachers make that jump, right? Between now, not only have I been to a training and I have the information, I'm getting some support in implementing this and making it successful. So, you know, we know that with our kids, when they're learning a new skill, they may try it once and it doesn't work for them and they get frustrated. Our teachers are no different.
That's right.
Building in those supports for some coaching is really important as well. And so that's another area that our network and all of the networks are also going to be looking at, is coaching cycles.
Yeah, that's huge, just because you think about it. Like, one thing we know through research is that it takes embedded supports, ongoing supports. It takes coaching. That's one of the things I think Pam and I both enjoy as liaisons, is that we get a little more time to spend with, those educators out in the field we're supporting. And not that we're the coaches telling them all what to do, but that we can really kind of get up beside them and say, help me understand where your struggles are. And so that's what's exciting for ESCs out there that have our liaisons all around the state now, is we get to kind of engage in some of that coaching as well. And I mean, I think firsthand, I've seen how powerful it is for practitioners that just really need more than just to come in and sit and get a training. They need someone that they can pick up the phone and call. They need someone that'll come out and spend a few hours with them. They need someone that, that's how we kind of person to person and system to system, we kind of start seeing those changes, I think.
This is a little bit off topic, but one of the things that I've noticed at our service center anyway, at Region 20, is that our consultants started having office hours where they were just available for anybody to call and ask questions. And I thought, that's something that we probably ought to keep because of what you just said, John, so that they're doing a lesson and it didn't go well. They can call and say, here's what I did, help me.
Yeah.
What can I do?
Yeah.
At Region 20, we have from 1 to 4 every day, we do parent calls, and they know they can call us with questions. But I think that needs to go to teachers.
Gosh, that'd be
huge.
huge.
Available, so much more available to them.
And I think some of that really and truly is attributable to TEA and to the position that they've tried to take of having more of a two-way conversation, between the agency and ESCs and ESCs and LEAs and the agency. And it's like, hey, listen, we've tried this one-way flow of information and we always end up with kinks in the chain. And so what if we tried to really be humble and open up and say, look, let's all kind of share and learn together. And that way we can really be more cognizant to what is really going on with the boots on the ground, kind of from moment to moment, rather than from school year to school year. And the whole idea of lead measures and it's just, I don't know, it's refreshing to me. And I enjoy the work because I enjoy that we're moving in a direction that feels like we're really taking action.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yep.
Well, Pam, I know we can keep going. You know me, girl.
I know you can, but Cara has an appointment. So
I know.
We're not going to keep going. So sometimes we do this little game, and what we ask every participant is to think about where you are, think about inclusion in Texas, and if you could sum it up in one word, what would it be?
Belonging.
That's a good one.
That's good.
Can I agree with Cara?
No, we don't play that.
Oh no. Oh, I like belonging. I guess I would say then, wow, that's really hard. Unity then, which is kind of.
Yeah, that's a good one, unity. Pam, are we going to do one?
Yeah,
I always want to throw one in.
I know you always want to jump in.
Mine is, and I may have used this in the past, but this is kind of where I tend to spend time in my head, and that's possibility. I think we spend so much time thinking about disability, thinking about what, and our systems are set up to where, hey, look, we have to justify why you receive a service or a intervention, or that's okay. But just because the system is designed that way doesn't mean we have to stay focused into the dis part. We could focus in the possibilities. So I think inclusion always makes me think about what's possible. What could we achieve?
That's cool.
Okay. And I think mine would be mindfulness. Mindfulness, that we're really mindful of kids and what it is they need, what they need, and and even mindful of teachers and how to prepare them for this environment that, you can't go in not preparing teachers and be very, like I said, mindful of students as well as the educators. That's be my word, mindfulness.
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, guys, we really appreciate y'all coming on and spending a little time with us today. It takes courage to put yourself out there and to be willing to, get online and talk about the things you're passionate about. But I'll tell you, we really appreciate it. And we're super excited to highlight the amazing things that are going on, with the Inclusion in Texas Network. So until we meet again.
To continue to elevate the conversation, hit us up on Twitter at SPEDTalk 2020, where you can find links to all of our episodes and each of the resources that we discussed today.
John, also links to the resources will be available at our podcast site.
And if you found these resources helpful, be sure to share them with a friend, because information should always flow through us, not to us.
That will do it for this episode of SPEDTalk.
And remember, courage creates culture and kindness keeps us connected.
Until the next time, I'm Pam.
And I've been John.
And this is
SPEDTalk.
Elevate the conversation.
Living in the moment, and the moment is the future.